Are you looking for a great fall treat that you can enjoy with a cup of coffee, tea, or maybe even cocoa? Or maybe you just went apple picking and you're looking for something new to do with those apples. Well, I have the perfect solution for you here. These are my soft apple cookies, definitely bursting with fall flavors. And whether you want to have them on hand for a snack or you want something that you can put on your holiday dessert table, these are perfect. So if you'd like to see how these are done, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now yes, today is one of mine, but I wasn't planning on doing one of mine. I was planning on doing a recipe I found on Midlife Healthy Living. It was for crock-pot baked apples. I was going to do that. I even bought the apples for it. But once I came up with this recipe, I knew this was the one I wanted to do instead. But if you are interested in the baked apples, the crock-pot baked apples, they are WW. I will link that down in the description box so you can find that. I may do it at some point in the future, but I'm not sure. So if baked apples are your thing, go check out that link. Now what I'm making today, still using apples, actually some of the apples that I bought for the other recipe, I am making, as you saw on the thumbnail, soft apple cookies. Now I saw a few different videos from foreign countries where they would do these cookies. They looked really enticing, so I thought I'd had to try it. Of course, I had to put my recipes with Roy tweaks on them to get them low in bites, points, and calories. And they are so good, perfect for the fall. So let's go over the ingredients. I have here 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and if you wanted, if you needed to up your protein intake, you could replace up to a half a cup of that with some vanilla protein powder and get some extra protein into these cookies. Here I have 2 largish apples. I am using a Granny Smith and a Honeycrisp. I want a little mix of the sweet with the tart, so I'm using a mixture. You don't have to, you can use both the same apple, but you want to make sure that it's a baking apple, not something like a Red Delicious or Golden Delicious, any of those softer type apples. You don't want that. What you want is something like Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, Jana Gold is another good one, Macintosh, and there are others. You can Google what might be the best baking apple in your area. Here I have 2 eggs, and yes, those are at room temperature. I'm baking, so everything is at room temperature. Here I have 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce, and that is taking the place of the butter or oil that I saw in some of the other videos. And it really does make these nice and moist and really enhances that apple flavor. Here I have 1/2 cup of sugar replacement. I'm using the all-purpose in the raw, but anyone that you use is fine. I have 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of apple pie spice, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now the apple pie spice you don't have to use. In the recipe I do call for cinnamon, but I also say in the notes that you can use apple pie spice, which is a blend of like cinnamon, nutmeg, a little ginger, things like that. And I did do some holiday spice blends. It was probably 2 years ago now, I think. I gave you pumpkin pie spice, a gingerbread spice, poultry seasoning, and apple pie spice. So I'll card that up here in case you want any of those spice blends, which with the upcoming holidays might come in handy. Now, 2 things I didn't mention yet, but I'm going to mention now. I have 1 tablespoon of confectioner sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of apple pie spice. Again, you can use the cinnamon in place of that. That's what I did the first time. And I'm actually using real confectioner sugar because it didn't really affect the bites and points too much until you had like 2 or 3. But a little real sugar on here isn't going to damage things too much. But again, that is for our topping of these cookies, and it is totally optional. You don't have to use it. You could even mix this together with a little almond milk and make a glaze for these. That would also be delicious. So you do have some options of a topping, no topping, or maybe even a glaze. So those are the ingredients. Let me shuffle a few things around and we'll get started. Okay, so first things first, we're going to make the dough for our cookies. We're going to start with the dry ingredients, the flour, sugar replacement, baking powder, salt, and the apple pie spice. And just whisk those together. You want to get everything uniform in here so that you get all of the flavorings and the leaveners distributed well. So that's come together. I'm going to move that aside, bring in another small bowl. And this one, I'm going to add in our 2 wet ingredients, our eggs and our applesauce, and break up those yolks, and then just whisk these 2 things together just to get those well combined. I maybe should have used a little bigger bowl so I didn't have to worry about splashing. All right, so that's done. I'm going to bring back in the flour mixture, add our wet mixture into the dry, and you want to make sure you get all of that moisture in here because, as I said, there's not a lot of liquid in this recipe. And now we're just going to combine it. This time I'm switching to a spatula because this is going to get very thick and you don't want to overwork the flour and make these tough. So just work that in, and it will seem like you don't have enough liquid in here, but you just keep working, pressing down, getting that flour incorporated into the liquid. It'll just be a matter of folding things over to get that dry flour from the bottom up onto the rest of the dough here, and just keep working it in until it's all incorporated. And you just don't want to see any bits of the flour left. And that looks good right there. No flour, very thick. As I said, that's what you're looking for. I'm now going to set this aside because we need to deal with these apples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel these apples and I'm going to core them and then cut them into about a 1/2 inch size, which is about half of this top part of my pinky. I've measured this, that's where I guide 1 inch. That's a good idea if you have like a little section of a finger that is about 1 inch. You can use that as a guide so you don't have to worry about getting rulers or things like that. Just a rough guide. But I'm going to show you part of one just so you can see what size I'm going for as I cut them, because some of the chunks, if some of them are a little bigger, it's not going to really harm anything. You just want to make sure they're not too large to make too big of a statement in the cookie. You will definitely get apple in every bite, and you definitely want to peel them because the texture of the peel would not go over well in these cookies. All right, so I've gotten rid of my peels. Now I'm just going to cut this apple into quarters. And you could, if you have a corer, you could use that. I have a corer, but this is just easier to me. I'm going to diagonally cut across to get rid of this middle section here. And then I check here to make sure that I got rid of all of that I don't want. And I'm just going to do that on each one. So now we have the core and any seeds out of our apple. And now because these are kind of thick, they're about 1 inch. So I'm going to cut them in half this way and then cut them into about 1/2 inch sections across, then turn those and do the same thing. So they're roughly all about the same size. As I said, they don't have to be uniform. It's not going to make that big of a difference. And then I'm just going to throw them into the bowl with the dough as I continue on with the rest. So let me get the apples in there and I'll be back. Okay, so I've got all my apples in there. Now comes the hardest part, which is just mixing all of those apples in. Because this is a very thick dough, it's going to take a little work to get those incorporated. And you will notice the dough getting a little more moist from the apples. So it'll soften up a little bit and make things a little bit easier. For now, it's just going to be a challenge of trying to get all of these apples incorporated, and that may take a minute or two. And what I will do a lot of the time is just fold it, like go down in the bottom, flip it over and mash everything down so that way everything gets incorporated. Okay, that looks fairly well incorporated to me. It is going to look like way too many apples for this, but trust me, it's going to work out. Now I have a number 14 scoop, which is about a 1/4 cup. If you use a 1/4 cup measure, you would just want to spray it with some cooking spray to make sure it comes out. But because this has a little sweeper, it should come out just fine. So I'm going to set this over here and bring in my cookie sheet and then just start portioning them out. What I do is I fill the bowl of the scoop and press it against the side to make sure that it is even, that each one is going to be the same. And because it will depend on the size of the apples, how much dough you'll actually get out of this, you may need to, once you get the 12 out, portion out anything that's remaining in the bowl to just make them all the same size rather than making more. And you do want about 1 inch between each one. They're not going to spread much, so you don't have to worry about them being far apart, but you do want them to have a little room. All right, so let me get these onto the cookie sheet and I'll be back. Okay, there's the last one, and I got perfectly 12 portions, so my apples must have been just the right size. And you can push things back in, like if some apples falling out a little bit while you were scooping. So now these are going into a 350-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes until the bottom has browned, and you will get some browning on the top, but they still may be pale. So just about 20 to 25 minutes and check the bottom, because the top may remain light and the bottom would keep darkening. But 20 to 25 minutes and I'll be back. And here we have them fresh out of the oven. Now you'll see, as I was saying, there's not a lot of color on top. They're still kind of pale, but if you tap on them a little bit, they're firm. That's what you're looking for. And the bottom has gotten some browning. But now what we have to do is we have to let them cool for at least a half an hour. If I tried to put the confectioner sugar and apple pie spice on top now, it would just melt right into them. And that's not what I want. But for now, as usual, we have to play the waiting game. So let me let these cool about half an hour and I'll be back. It has been about a half an hour. They are still slightly warm, but that's not going to bother anything. You just don't want them hot or that sugar will melt. And what I did was, after 5 minutes on the baking sheet, I removed them, put them on the cooling rack, and I took the parchment and I snuck it underneath the cooling rack here, because we're going to make a little mess now. And as I said, this part is optional. You don't have to do this. I'm also going to crowd the cookies slightly so that they're more centrally located and less spillover. And what I'm going to do is take my confectioner sugar and my apple pie spice or cinnamon, whatever you're using, and just whisk that together just to get these two combined. And as I said, you could take a little bit of almond milk. I would just do like a drizzle or two, because it might look like you don't have enough liquid when you make a glaze, but usually you err on the side of caution, because once you've worked it a little bit, it does melt down and become more glaze-like. So you could make this into a glaze if you want. And again, you could use sugar replacement, powdered sugar replacement if you'd prefer. I am going for the real deal because, as I said, it's not going to affect the bites or points too much. So now I'm going to dump this into my sieve and just give it a little tap over each of the cookies to dust them with our cinnamon sugar. And then I can move this cooling rack aside and carefully pick up the parchment paper so that I can get rid of all of this cinnamon sugar. And that is all there is to making some soft apple cookies that are so good. They're very pillowy. They're not going to get crunchy like a regular cookie. I love the texture. You get that soft cookie and then a little bite of the apple. So good. I hope you give these a try. But before we move on any further, let's go over those nutrition facts. Now, as I said, I'm doing it with the dusting of sugar that I use. If you don't, that would probably drop the calories and macros a little bit, but it's not going to really affect the bites or points. So this obviously makes 12, and for each one, it's going to be 2 Better Balance bites or old Blue Points. I'm on the Healthy Better Balance plan, which is the equivalent to the old WW Blue plan. those are the bites and points that I give, and they're approximately where their current plan is. Now, if you are following calories, the calories for one of these delicious cookies is going to be 111. And if you are following macros, the fat would be 1 gram, saturated fat would be 0.3 grams, protein would be 3.3 grams, and if you need to boost that, as I said, just swap out up to a half a cup of the flour for some protein powder. Carbs would be 30.3 grams, fiber would be 1.4 grams, and sugars would be 4.9 grams. And again, that's because I'm using confectioner sugar on these. So that does bring up the sugars a little bit, but well worth it. These are so good. There you have it, a nice fall treat. And the smell is definitely luring me in, but I'm trying to restrain myself. But hopefully you won't restrain yourself from giving me a like, comment, share, hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. We do have a tag video coming up the second Tuesday of November. If those of you who are interested in those tags, that's coming up. We also have a collab coming up for Thanksgiving dishes. And boy, do I have a treat for you on that one. I just tested it last night. Oh my God, so good. Paul and I loved it. We had 2 pieces, but I'm not going to tell you any more. At least not yet. Now, if you want the recipe for these, it is of course going to be on my blog. I will link directly to this recipe down in the description box. Also down there are links to my blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. Also my Amazon storefront, my Built Bar rewards, Stretch rewards, and my social media if you'd like to follow me over there. There's my Instagram and 3 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out that description box for all sorts of information. Well, I think these are definitely cooled down enough for me to have a little snack. And I hope that you'll be enjoying these yourself very soon. So until next time, bye.